My name is John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia. And it's an absolutely fabulous day. Springish already, and again, we have an amazing guest today. Her name is Katie, and she is from Eugene, Oregon, United States. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be on this podcast and to hear your story and to talk about mine. And I love being here and connecting with others. So I'm really excited.
So, for our guest, Katie is a diagnosed ADHD, and she will tell us about how it all kind of evolved from the beginning. So, give us a bit of your background about you in a general sense. Were you born in you said earlier you were born in Arkansas and now you live in Eugene, Oregon? Or maybe give us your background.
Yeah, of course. So I'm actually born and raised in Eugene, Oregon, here in the U.S. My family on my mom's side, they're all from Arkansas and Arkansonians, and they all kind of migrated over here to the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, I'm 29 years old. I'm an accidental influencer, it's like I like to say. It's just, cat person, chronic, hobby dropper, hobby hopper. And I'm always starting something new. I guess there's so much to know. It's hard to pinpoint, I guess, what I want to share quite yet.
Yeah. So you were educated in Eugene, Oregon?
Yeah. Yep. I actually taught preschool for 8 years. So I was a preschool teacher for about 8 years before I actually ended up getting diagnosed. And so I always had a huge passion for arts and crafts and had a lot of energy and always did really well with children and really connected with children, and especially my kids who had autism or ADHD. I always felt like I really could support and connect and understand where they were coming from before I even knew that I was ADHD myself.
So autism, ADHD, and did you always kind of knew that it was part of you, or you felt in a way, because I believe you were diagnosed when you were 26, 28, 29?
Yeah, so ADHD was never something I actually heard of until pretty recently. I think that I heard of it knowing that it was popular with, young boys, and that meant they were really hyperactive, but I never fell into that category. I was a super big tomboy. I was hyperactive as well. I was a big talker. People say that I was talking out of the womb and haven't stopped. And so there were definitely a lot of signs that showed that I was neurodivergent in some way. I just don't think my parents really knew how to support me because I was a really happy kid, and I still am generally happy. And so I think when someone is happy, even when they're struggling, people don't really think that they need the type of support that I was really needing because I was really struggling inside. But I was diagnosed at 29 from watching TikToks online, and started seeing all these videos online popping up that I could really relate to on a deeper level, and thought, wow, I can really relate to a lot of these videos, and I saw myself in a lot of their content. And I think at first I was like, well, everybody's like that. Everybody is forgetful or ditzy or unorganized and talks a lot and can be kind of hyper. And I think I always kind of knew something was different about me because I was the quirky, funny friend, but I didn't have anybody to relate that to besides I was just different. And I think I enjoyed being different. A part of me really enjoyed being unique and quirky and interesting and out of the box. But it still affected my life in other ways where I really struggled in school and a lot, mostly academically. But I guess I found a way to make it work.
So talk about your academic journey, if you wish. You did high school?
Yeah, so I in elementary school, so I was actually diagnosed with dyslexia very young.
Right.
And that was probably the first thing that popped up on my journey as something that was definitely different, as I always struggled reading and reading comprehension. And on top of that, unfortunately, I was born legally blind. And so they didn't realize that I struggled in school so much because of my dyslexia. They thought that I just needed to sit closer to the front of the desk and wear glasses and all of those things. And eventually, when I got diagnosed with dyslexia, I was put in some more programs that help people that with reading and reading comprehension. And I think when I started getting that online support, or not online support, sorry, started getting that like one-on-one support is when I really started to thrive. I really needed someone to kind of teach me how to read correctly, and then also how to like put what I'm reading into context so I could save later, because a lot of times I read something one time and it's gone. And so that was definitely something from elementary school all the way to high school. I was in special education reading programs, which was really tough for me being in high school and being a cheerleader and having a lot of friends and really thriving socially. I really just, no one knew that academically I was really struggling in things like math and science and reading. But the things that I was passionate in, I was really successful at. And I could do really well in the classes I really enjoyed or thought were interesting. And yeah, so, but then you get into like the ADHD side is not only did I struggle in reading and comprehension, I really struggled focusing in class for long periods of time, sitting still. I'd get distracted easily and I would daydream in class a lot. And so the bell would go off and I would realize, oh no, I just sat in an hour-long class and didn't hear anything the teacher said. And I'd shove my papers in my backpack and I think being disorganized and, I was messy and forgetful. So when you have all those things along with a learning disability, I think that it really affected me in like in a way that was much deeper. It made me feel really insecure about myself and like worried like I'm not smart or I'm dumb but in other parts of my academic career in art classes or anything that I was really passionate about, I do really well. And so people are like, well, she is smart enough to do well in this. So why is she getting D's and C's in this class? It just doesn't make sense. Well, now that makes a lot of sense. It was ADHD.
So you went through high school. Did you finish high school?
Yeah, I ended up finishing high school barely. I my senior year, I think I got like the senior year syndrome where I did okay academically and was about average. In my senior year, I really struggled. I was getting bullied a lot and barely scraped by. I remember my counselor, as I was walking across the stage, kind of gave me a high five, like, you did it, you're graduating, because everyone believed in me and they saw this person who on the outside was like thriving really well, but academically just not. And then I ended up going to school for early childhood education because I've always wanted to teach either special education or work with children. I knew that was something I always wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so right after high school, I ended up going to college and getting taking some classes in early education, and then got hired at a creative art school in Portland, which was huge to me.
So just talking about when you were trained in college, did you then finish a course that then allowed you to go and start teaching or interacting?
Yeah, I did. I think at the time it was only a year-long program, so it wasn't technically like a degree or anything. It was just a year of this. And then if you were in school for the year while working, which is also what I was doing, I was working at a preschool as I was getting trained. And so if you had a year of that program in the college and then a year working experience, you could teach preschool. And so I kind of did both at the same time. So I went to school while I worked at a preschool and then got that and was able to go on and teach.
And yeah, interesting. And so how did then your diagnosis come about? Because now you saw it on TikTok.
Yeah.
Anybody in your family that is affected by it?
Yeah, so that was like 2012 is when I got done with school and I was teaching. And then actually around 2020, about 10 years later, we were all in lockdown. And I was actually in the process of going back to school because teaching was kind of, I just felt like it had run its course, and I didn't have the same amount of passion as I did for teaching. As much as I loved it, I just didn't feel like I wasn't getting paid enough, and I wasn't making enough money. And I thought, well, what can I do that gives me a creative outlet? So decided to enroll in college to be a graphic designer. And while I was in college, I was taking 16 credits, and I was overloading my schedule, and I was working so hard, and I still had straight A's because they were all classes I really loved and really thrived well in. And then 2020 happened, and we were put on lockdown. And I think that really put me in a box and put me in an environment that I wasn't comfortable in, being by myself, not being able to interact with others. And that's kind of when I found TikTok, and I started seeing those videos was then. And I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. And at the same time, I was talking to my college counselor because I was convinced that I had early like signs of dementia, because my great grandfather had dementia, my grandfather has dementia. And so I thought, oh my gosh, it hit me. I'm gonna be the one that has it. I thought I had early onset dementia, and that's really what got me to go to a doctor and say, like, what is going on with me? I'm really scared. I'm not able to focus. I don't have any short-term or long-term memory like I used to. And that's kind of was the beginning of when I started looking into ADHD. And then after I got diagnosed and I told my family, I found out that my oldest brother had ADHD. And my family just wasn't, he was on medication, he was treated, he was fine, and he was taken care of. But I was always just struggling on the surface, and no one really knew, because he was so like the picture perfect ADHD boy. He marked all the boxes for what ADHD looks like in men. And now it makes so much more sense when I look back on it. And then after I was diagnosed, I found out my oldest brother was diagnosed with ADHD. I found out that last year I found out that my youngest brother actually has ADHD. So it's all throughout my family. It's all over there. And even though my parents are so kind and supportive and loving, they still play the role of like, I don't know where this came from. Who knows? How did you get it? Maybe it's your environment. Maybe you ate too much red dye as a kid, so who really knows? But I could tell you my opinion on who I got it from, whether it's one or both of my parents, but it's there. I mean, you could follow the family tree and it's there. And so I think it's definitely impacted a lot of people in my family, even the ones who don't know they have it.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. So now at 29, you have being diagnosed. Mm-hmm. It changed everything for you, from self-confidence. And now you started becoming very proactive and spreading the message. Mm-hmm. So you've been podcasting very actively on ADHD throughout the world, not limited to an area around you, but in other places as well. Mm-hmm. How did you
I think I think that when it first happened, we all get that, like, when it finally clicks, and I think you've probably experienced that feeling where you have all these questions in your mind, or you have all these puzzle pieces that don't quite make any sense, and then one day something just clicks in your head, and all of a sudden the timeline of your life, all those things you struggled with, all the things that you somehow pulled out of the hat and it worked out, or all the, like, that thing that we have with ADHD is where it always feels like we're falling down, but it's like successfully, and so falling up almost. And all those things started to really make sense to me. And I thought, wow, like, people need to hear about this. Like, I can't be the only person, the only woman who has all these symptoms and have struggled and have looked for answers and not found them, or got misdiagnosed or diagnosed with anxiety or something else, or bipolar disorder. And I think that to me, it lit a fire in me as, like, I need to share my experiences. I need to tell people what my doctor is telling me, and there wasn't, back when I started doing this, there really wasn't a lot of representation on how it looked like in women either. It still was, all the content I was seeing was mostly men. And even though I was relating to their content, there wasn't anybody out there that looked like me who could say, this is what it looks like for me. And I wasn't sure how when I started this whole process, how am I going to tell my family that I have ADHD when I didn't even know? And I was almost 30, so I'm thinking like, there's no point, is there? And eventually I thought, no, let's just like make a video about it. And so when people come to me with all the questions, I'll just have like a short little video. And I posted it on TikTok on a whim, and I got over 8 million views on it. 8 million
Oh
people all
my
over the
God.
world. So my secret was out. And so at that point, it kind of was one of those accidental things where I posted something and about my experiences to hopefully help other people connect those dots. And I fell into this role of really just being an advocate, and we have such big hearts, and we're so full of ideas and such creative people. I think I just followed that dopamine and thought, you know what, I'm going to use this platform. I'm going to use this following to help others, like, any way I could. And at the time, it was just telling people what it was like for me. And then eventually grew into creating resources and having a podcast and interviewing experts and all of that. But at first, it really just started out as like, this is a day in my life.
Yeah. So, obviously, you have read my book. The book that you have not read is I'm ADHD, big time. And but it took me, as I said before the program started, I'm living in Prince George, British Columbia. I was born in Holland, 1940. We were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945. And it made such an impression on me that I always knew I was going to go to Canada. That was my dream. And then the other dream that I had that I developed is I wanted to build a lumber company because my dad managed the lumber company. My grandfather was a master carpenter, and I knew I wanted to build my own lumber mill. And I did that in Canada. When I came here and to Canada, I wanted to start from the bottom. I'll tell you a little bit later, it will kind of fall into place. So I left Holland with one suitcase when I was 24, with 3 books and 1 camera. And then I wanted to go to British Columbia because that's where all the lumber and timber is. And I landed in Montreal, took the train to Vancouver, couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. And then, fortunately, I went to the immigration department in Vancouver. Fortunately, there was a German fellow, I could speak some German. And I told him what I wanted to do. I want to build my lumber mill. And he said, Prince George, 700, or I'm thinking all the time kilometers, so I'm going to say miles, about 500 miles north of Vancouver. He said, that's a boom town, that's where they're building sawmills, pulp mills, that's where you should go. That's where I want. When I was 24. When I came off the bus here in Prince George, about 2 or 3 blocks away from here, I had 1 suitcase, obviously, 3 books, 1 set of clothes, and I had exactly $25.47. Now, what it says underneath this is what the employees gave me at my operation. It says attitude, passion, work ethic, what follows, success. And now the other thing that you may find interesting, since you have it right next to you, if you look at the back of the book, what's the price of the book?
$25.47.
That's the one.
That's so funny. I love that. How clever.
So now I've come back to when I grew up during the Second World War, and it was tough times for my family. For my mother, I had 3 kids. My dad was in the Dutch Army, drafted in early 1940, and was caught in Rotterdam when they bombed Rotterdam. And it's kind of interesting in a way because today is the 9th of May, and it's a special day for us in Holland on the 5th of May, because it was the liberation of Holland, and everybody still celebrates that.
Oh, that's nice.
But in any event, so it was, as we now see around the world, and what comes to mind is the Ukraine and some of the other places where there is war, that people will be affected by it not only now and then hopefully when everything is over, everything gets back to normal. That's not so. It will continue for generations in some cases, and especially to young people. So for me, I was 5 when the war ended, and then the family tried to put things back together. I went to school, and so did my brother and my sister. My brother was 2 years older, my sister 1 year older. I was not good in school. I failed grade 3. Nobody fails grade 3 that I know of. The other day I did a presentation in a group, and the guy in the middle of about 300 people said, "Yeah, I failed grade 3." I said, "Okay, just the two of us then." So but the other thing that, from there on in, I failed grade 7 3 times, and then at that point, my parents had to make a decision, and they were sweet people, very, very supportive, but the recommendation was they should send me to the mentally challenged school or get me a job. Fortunately, they got me a job at 14, and I became a furniture maker, and which served me well as I went forward. From there on in, I was then drafted into the Dutch Air Force when I was 18 for 2 years, but my dream was to go to Canada because deep down I had the feeling I had failed. And, because all my friends that were once my friends, were still going to school after grade 7. I was a laborer, and now I could not even, everybody rides bikes there, and the school and the workplace that I was going to was about 10 kilometers away from the place that I lived, but I could not really ride with them because I was a laborer. And sometimes this is pretty hard, and hard on a young person in particular. And so I see so many things similar between you and me. Amazingly, I was a very happy-go-lucky guy. Amazingly. But I was struggling inside. And I had to prove that I could do it. And so I made the decision to go to Canada, apply for immigration, went to the Dutch embassy when I was 24. Already I had a career just before that. After I came out of the Air Force when I was 20, had a career with one of the major lumber importers of Holland. Even with my education, or the lack thereof, already was quite successful in, but I didn't feel it that way. I had to still prove something, if to no one else, to me. And I then decided to leave Amsterdam with $150, one suitcase, one set of clothes, 3 books, and go to British Columbia and build my sawmill, my own lumber mill. And so hence, when I came here in Prince George, nearly 60 years ago now, 58 years ago now, but say 60 years ago, within 10 years, I started out working for a lumber mill here as a cleanup man. Within a year, I was a superintendent. That didn't go quick enough for me. Then, I don't know how familiar you are with the British Columbia, but even north of British Columbia, on the west side is Alaska, but north of British Columbia is the Yukon Territory. And I ended up managing a mill in the Yukon Territory. Yukon Territory, very cold.
That's like Alaska, right? It's like almost Alaska.
Yeah, it snows in July and you don't know if it is late or early, that kind of a place. And I was there for 5 years managing a mill Then I came back to Prince George and started my own company, then Brink Forest Products, that later became the Brink group of companies and a whole group of other companies. But so that's kind of where I started, with 3 employees and myself, is an idea of getting something off the ground. And then that was in 1975. I was then 35 years old. And then it took me till I was 57 before I walked into a store, and that really showed me something that I had no idea even existed. But in between the period when I came to Canada, was successful in my job, started a company, one of the biggest challenges that I had, not so much that I had the ability, not so much that I was a hard worker, not that I believed I was smart and bright and that I could attract bankers to lend me money or invest in my companies. I still felt of myself like a failure, even then. Although everybody said, oh, you're so successful and all those kind of things. And the other part that was a challenge for me, I was not a good communicator. That as soon as there were more than 3 or 4 people out of my normal setting, it was difficult for me to interact. Mm-hmm. I would kind of know later, at least in my mind, as to why, directly likely related to ADHD. So the operation was quite successful, and gradually we went forward and became larger. Then when I was 57, I walked into this store. I still don't know why, because as you already said earlier, being ADHD, we have a difficult time focusing on the book, because as soon as you show me a page and it becomes boring, I lay the book down because I'm done, right? So anyway, I picked up this book and I have no idea why. And I looked at the book and it said ADHD, and all of a sudden a light went on and I said, oh my God, it's me. And yeah. I read the book and I was standing there and went through it and went through it more and more, and finally the guy that owned the store came over there and he said, we gonna buy it or what? So not quite, but So I bought the book, and then I wrote in the book in Dutch, now I finally know who I am. Because I didn't want to write it in English because I was ashamed of it, right? The stigma, and then if I want to build a company, what am I going to say to the banker? This is my business plan and blah, 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 and all the other things. And oh, by the way, I have a mental problem, ADHD. And he would say, have a nice day, So I was very careful with it. And then it took me even then, Kathy, 5 years before I talked to my family doctor that had delivered my 2 daughters, had known me, was a friend, knew me well, that I went into his office, and as I walked in, that he said, hi, John, why are you here, John? I said, I think I got ADHD. And so we spent time together, and yeah, he said, I believe so too. That was in 2002, when I was already 62 years old. So, and then it became a question, what do you do with that? So he prescribed, I said, well, what do I do? Then obviously, I spent time on Google and looking at, what do you do and how do you go about it? How do you fix it? And all of those kind of things, and then the more I looked at it, the more I believe that it's not a liability, that once I know how I use it, it can be an asset. And so then became very much part of my life, but I still didn't talk about it much. The other thing that happened to me is that by pure coincidence, is that a sister-in-law that I used to have, my ex-sister-in-law, was going to Toastmasters, and she dragged me to one of their meetings. And I said, no, I don't want to go there because they're going to ask, if I sit there, I don't mind sitting there, but I don't want anybody to talk to me. And I was halfway through the meeting, and they said, hey, John, tell us a little bit about you. And I said, oh, my God, I may as well, So I'll never go back there. Well, I did. And I stayed there for 10 years. And I don't know if you're familiar with Toastmasters or not. There are probably, in North America and around the world, right now, 400,000 people that are taking Toastmasters in clubs. They are in Eugene, I'm sure, and they are all around the world. And then probably 3, 4, 5 million people at a minimum that have participated in Toastmasters through different levels. The highest level in Toastmasters is becoming a distinguished Toastmaster, and there are probably only 0.5 to 1% of people that have participated in Toastmasters have stayed the whole way. You don't have to, but I did, and and today I'm a professional speaker. I'm obviously probably the most successful podcaster in Canada, I believe. We have on our social media, January, February, and March, up to 5 million views in our different views that we have, and then obviously I'm an author, So, and all of that was being unlocked and knowing and getting to know Toastmasters by pure coincidence, because I felt like I had been a failure, that I knew I was okay, no worse than, in some cases better than, and that I had to prove something to me to go to Canada to build a lumber mill, which I did, and we are one of the larger secondary manufacturers, probably in North America. We have 10 different companies, and the other thing that I did, especially the journey being so challenging in a lot of cases, falling down, standing up, and staying the course, that I felt I had to write a book about it. So I thought about it I lived it for 80 years, I thought about it for 20 years, and it took me 2 years to write it. I never wrote a book in my life, but it is very successful, and amazingly, Kathy, Katie, right? Amazingly, Katie, I'm a good writer.
I believe it. I know.
And I'm doing well with numbers. That was part of where I was good too. And so in this one, then, I knew autobiography, and autobiography, as you well know, is one of those books you cannot write it in. Since it's the first one, it's difficult writing books and going through the whole process. I cannot do it and write it and then 6 months later say, nah, not good enough, let me do another one. No, this is the one, So I did this one, we'll send it to you. And it's not hoorah, hoorah, John, how good he is and how well he did, how successful. It's not about that. It's about, starting from the bottom. It's all the challenges along the way and the mistakes along the way, and everything is in this book. And, against all odds, it's on all major media. What do you think the price on this one is? I showed you the price on this one.
I know. I was wondering because I know you said you only had $104 in your pocket or something. So I'm like, man, that's going to be an expensive book.
$25.47.
Oh, awesome! I love that. Yeah, I love that, and I think these are great because they're like you said, people with ADHD tend to have a hard time staying focused. So giving them something that's not like a huge encyclopedia, I think those bite-sized books are so great for our brains.
Exactly. And then I knew, I had to do more in regards to ADHD. And then
Yeah.
about a year and a half, I started writing this book, ADHD Unlocked. And I want to do it in such a way that you can open the book anyway, you can start reading, or then close it and then start wherever you want to start again and do it again. And then the other part that you already noticed that I did, the foreword was written by a friend of mine, is Tracy Lodge, who's a medical doctor and a surgeon, emergency surgeon, ADHD, so and so I already know that if ADHD is a superpower. There is no question in my mind. And wherever the opportunity presents itself, I speak on the topic of ADHD. And the other part that I believe is that the frequency of occurrence much higher than initially was thought, and not much difference between male and female. It occurs on both sexes the same, and I could not have done. I can do 20 things all at the same time. And then the other part that works well for me, I have a very good memory, and all things that I should not have because of my, if you wish, lack of formal education. And so I say, certainly ADHD, should be understood, and it is an asset, not a liability.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I think that when I hear your story, I mean, you have an idea, and not only that, but people with ADHD, I think we often feel like we can't do anything wrong, and we have all these like blocks in front of us that makes life so much more challenging. But I don't know anyone more resilient than anyone with ADHD. We are so resilient. We push through. We make it against all odds, right?
Exactly.
We find our way through it. And sometimes we have an idea, and for some reason we pursue it and we make it happen. We start up and we're not really afraid to start down from the bottom. I'm not afraid to go start somewhere else and start fresh, because I have an idea and I know that it would be worse for me to sit on my hands and wait for something to happen. It's like, no, we are the people who make it happen. We're the
Exactly.
trailblazers, the creators. And
Exactly.
I love that about your story. And I love that you even touched on like that feeling of kind of like shame a little about how you wrote it in Dutch because you just weren't ready. And I feel like that sometimes when somebody asks me about what I do for a living, and I love my brain and I love the ADHD community, but sometimes even when I'm meeting a stranger, I'm like, is this something I really want to talk about? How are they going to react? Are they going to, because I know so much more about ADHD and we're in this world, but so many people out there have so much stigma around it and what it is and what they think it is. And they look at me and go, you don't have ADHD, or, well, you're so successful. You did this. You don't have ADHD. And I would say, you know what? The most successful people I know have ADHD.
It's because of it, not in spite of it, so
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can definitely connect with your story, especially in the lumber department. My mom was a secretary at a lumber mill growing up my entire life. And one day she went to the boss and said, I want to start buying and selling lumber. And now she owns her own business, and that's what she does for a living as a lumber broker. And it has incredible memory, is great with people, and loves what she does. And so, I mean, that's kind of, that Pacific Northwest side of us. We're all very involved in the lumber community here. And it's not an easy job. I know it's tough.
A challenge. You should check out my company, the Brink Forest Products Ltd. I've been in business for over 50 years, and so we most of our market is in the United States, especially in the south and southeastern area. So the other part that I find so interesting about it is when I wrote this book, ADHD Unlocked. I towards the end, and there is a period in which the book is nearly done, I felt good about it, but there was something missing, so, and we were pretty much at the point where we are now in my third book, is where the book is getting ready we self-publish now. I didn't with the first one, but now we are with this book and other books. And so it's ready to go to the printers, and we're making it print ready. And then so the printers can put it into their system and spits out the copies. But I felt there was something that was missing. And by pure coincidence, we have a place in Victoria, and you know where Victoria is. So every Friday I go to Victoria. I usually leave here at 2:00, fly down to Victoria, and it takes about an hour and a half, and then spend the weekend there, come back to Prince George on Mondays. And I was sitting next to a fella in the plane, and the fella said, "You remember me?" I said, "Somehow I do." He said, "Well, my name is, Tom Romer, and I'm the Vice President Academics at the BC, British Columbia Institute of Technology, BCIT, very popular, major facility in British Columbia." And he was the VP, and I told him what I was doing. He had seen my first book, and I had talked to him about it, and then I told him about this book, and he said, "We should talk about it," because I told him the problems that people typical with ADHD have: lack of attention on areas that don't interest them. They are not really suited to sit in a school for 4 years, but they are trying to study something that should only take 6 months, and then having to do all the other things, and they're just not very good at that. And he said, "We are working on something." And so then we were at the point. The following week, by pure coincidence, he again was sitting in the same flight. The flight was full. I was sitting in 4A. He was sitting in 1F. And over all the people, I said, Tom, before you leave the plane, stay by the gate. I need to talk to you." And so he stayed there, and then we talked. And what we talked about is the concept of our educational system. And I'm not only talking Canada. US maybe has a similar issue. We have difficulty getting skill sets that we need in all different areas. And one of the problems is that the people have to spend too much time in schooling working on issues that are not even direct or indirectly related to the core of the issues that they are really trying to get to know. And that does two things. It leaves people out of that system to be successful. But the other part is we need them in our workplace, because we got a major shortage of skill sets, and so do you in the United States. And so they were dealing with the concept of micro-certification. And so what that means is that we have this scope of issues that we want to deal with in order for you to become an expert in this area, which takes about 6 months. And then all the other areas become secondary to developing that skill sets. And you can acquire those other areas over time, but it will allow you to function on these skill sets. And that, in my opinion, is a whole new approach to how do you deal not only with the shortage of skill sets, but in particular where it was important to me is in regards to ADHD.
Yeah.
But ADHD is not limited to being a slow learner. It happens, there are people that are simply slow learners. What comes to mind here in particular, I believe the United States is no different, First Nations or indigenous people that are, because of trauma, other things that they have experienced because of trauma, are not good learners in a setting where you have to sit for 4 years. And then, and then the other part is that I believe that ADHD, the frequency of occurrence, is so much higher than was anticipated that no matter what you do or who you are, you will be exposed to them either in your family, you are a good example, or in your friends, or in the workplace you work. It's critically important to understand the mind of an ADHD person because they are different. But different doesn't mean bad. It means it's a superpower. And once they have developed the skill sets to develop confidence, I'm at least equal to, not lesser than, but you have the special way of the superpower to do all these other things that you can do. I have a lot of people say to me, how can you do all those things? I say two things. I sleep fast and I got ADHD. And that's what makes them do to me. And so, but my mission in life is to, wherever I can, or wherever the opportunity presents itself, internationally or wherever, I talk about ADHD as some of the other things that I talk about doing keynotes and all the other things. And I find over and over and over again, virtually on a daily basis, fingers go up and say, I am, and on and on and on. And I believe, that to me is something that is important because you are an example, very similar to me. You were fortunate enough that you discovered it at an age that you are still on the threshold of your career going forward. With me, it took me till I was 62 until I was diagnosed, and only and somewhat later until I had reconciled it. But still, I hope I have enough time that wherever the opportunity presents itself, like it is today between you and me, I want to speak about it and say it's a superpower. And I hear it over and over and over again, that people that have read my book, against all, and it's not only my book, but other books as well. But this one is a little bit special. ADHD Unlocked. I had a fella we send copies to, and I send a lot of them for free, because that's how important it is to me. That said to me that he came to me, and I did a keynote here west of somewhere, and he came to me, he said, I want to thank you for sending me the book. And he said, my son and myself, we read it together.
Oh.
Wow.
I love that.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Yeah.
Yeah.
So important. Yeah.
I love that. That's I love that kind of response that you get, especially from parents, because I think that there's a part of them that wants to understand their child more. And that's a lot of responses I get where a parent reaches out to me and they're like, hey, I saw your content and I saw my daughter in you. And I just opened up my eyes to realize oh, wow, this girl who I love and think I know has ADHD and really needed somebody just to say, hey, I understand. And then they go through the diagnosis process and realize, oh, I have ADHD too. And so not only are we helping these kids have a voice and spread awareness and talk about ADHD, but we're also helping a lot of parents heal. A lot of parents understand their children and heal from whatever they are experiencing as well. And I think that is such a magical thing when you get that from a parent, because we without talking about it, they would have never known, or without sharing our story. And there is something so beautiful about that, and helping a family understand their child or helping them understand themselves for the first time. There's something so magical about that, especially now. And I love that.
Yeah, and especially if you consider and so I speak about it more and more and more and more all the time. So and and obviously doing my podcast thing that as well is that another presentation that I did is was about 20 people. And there again the same happened. These were people that were successful business people, and where two of them stuck up the finger and said, I've never told anybody, but I have the ADHD as well. So, and then getting to the point that saying we are now getting to the point in, people sitting around and watching all of this and seeing these people doing all these amazing things and saying, darn, I wish I had it too.
Oh, you know what? We really are. There's nothing we can't do. I love that about us. It's like not only are we resilient, but we're fast learners and we are adaptable. We always find a way to do something. And I think that there is this superpower that I do have with ADHD. And I often get asked a lot because I make all my content is about having ADHD. And people will say, well, don't make your whole personality ADHD, or don't make everything about your life about ADHD, or they are concerned that I'm making ADHD too much of who I am. But I would really like to think back and go, well, what about my life isn't impacted by ADHD? I would say a lot of my life is impacted by ADHD, and it's my story and my experiences, and somewhere out there, us talking about it helps somebody else feel like they belong for the first time. And that's more important.
Yeah, and there's no question about that, Kathy, is that, and then the other part about it is that since it has been looked at as something that is negative and saying, the problem with that person, unfortunately, she has ADHD, and that's not what it is. It's a gift, in my opinion, and it's a superpower. And once you understand it, you can then unlock it. And for me, I don't know with you, but I don't take medication. I never did. Initially when my doc, I still have it in my drawer actually, he gave me Adderall, 100 pills, and in the date is 2008 when he said. So I tried.
Those are probably a lot of money right now.
So I tried 3 of them. So there are still 97 in that tube sitting in my drawer in my office. I will never use it. I just kind of left them there, but it's kind of comical in a way, so, but...
Well, people always talk about how addictive they are, and I experienced something very similar to you when I was diagnosed and my doctor brought up medication. I think I was curious because I thought, well, what would it be like for, a day to be able to focus? And I got the prescription, I picked it up, and they sat on my counter for 2 months because I kind of was scared. I was like, do I want to be different? I know what it's like inside my brain. I've made it this far, and I'm not judging anyone who uses
No.
medication, but for me personally, it just was like, do I want to change who I am? Do I want to adapt to this where I'm already doing, like, I am struggling, but I like who I am, and I found a way to work with my brain. And so they kind of sat there for 2 months, and one day I thought, okay, well, I'll just try it. And nothing happened. I didn't feel any different. And I kind of thought, you know what? I don't want to take a pill every day. I already have to take vitamins. I already have to do this and that. I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm not very good at sticking to routines. So I thought, I know I'm not going to. And then all of a sudden, what if I need to take it and I forget to pack it on a trip? And it just, to me, it was like more of a problem for me to introduce that into my routine than to keep trying to find solutions that work for me and using tools that are out there naturally. And, I recommend people talking to their doctor and figuring out if medication's the right choice for you. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. It really just depends on the person. But I mean, it didn't feel different enough for me to want to keep up with it, or in the stress alone. I was like, no, I'm fine. I figured it out somehow. I'll figure it out now. And so that's kind of, I try to feed my soul in ways like spending time outside with nature and spending time with my cat and doing things that I enjoy, like cooking and painting and stuff like that. And I think that when I give myself permission to do things I enjoy, it allows me to put time aside to do things that I might not enjoy as much, like work or whatever.
Yeah, so I feel the same as you did. I try, and obviously I'm not a medical doctor, nor do I give medical advice. But for me, it didn't do nothing, and I feel the same. I feel fine the way I am, and obviously many years later, after I got that prescription, those 100 pills, I'm at peace with it. Not only am I at peace with it, it's a superpower, and I know that some of the things that I do are typical to ADHD, and it has been the key to my success more so than anything else, and that I call it a blessing. That I was very fortunate to be born ADHD. The other things that happened to me is that, in coming back to when I first started telling you about it, I was born in 1940, and you have not been in Holland, right? Have you?
Oh, I wish. I would love to go someday.
Yeah, you should. It's very nice. I was born in northeastern Holland, in the very northeastern part, within about 10 minutes from the German border. And things were pretty rough there during the war years. And, so I still remember hundreds of bombers overhead bombing Germany. And then obviously remember the liberation. Things got pretty rough, seeing far too many things we shouldn't see, and was affected by PTSD because of it, so which always stays with you. And the other one was that my dad, as I said, the last time they saw him was during the bombing of Rotterdam, and we didn't see him again until after the liberation. So my mom was alone with 5 kids, trying to survive through the Second World War. And a lot of times, from the time that I was 3.5, 4 years old, we would go, the 3 of us, the kids, my brother was 2 years older, my sister 1 year older. We get a gunny sack in the mornings and we go into the rail yards and pick up anything edible and burnable, and just to kind of stay alive. And and then there was no food, and especially not in the hunger winter of 1944 and 1945, which was extremely cold in Holland. And a lot of old people and young kids died because of lack of food and all those other things. And then we had a little stove that in a little one room of our house that was kept warm, and we sit around there and just trying to stay warm. And so then it developed something that I was treated for when I was quite late in life, when I was in counseling, is to the inner child. And meaning worrying about losing your caretaker or your parent, since there's only one of them. And, so the combination of all of that and ADHD, it's important. I talk about that in my book, saying that there were certain challenges, all along the way, but I still stayed the course, still wanted to develop the dream of going to Canada, followed through with that dream, then felt I had been a failure, but I didn't feel that myself. I know I could do it. I had to prove it to me. Start with very little money, come to Canada, and then build a mill, which I did. And then following all of that, not so much hoorah, hoorah, but then I have an obligation to talk about it. And that's what I'm doing. That's why it is important. And writing about it,
You have such a inspiring story, and I love that you were vulnerable enough to share with me about your PTSD, because a lot of people with ADHD also suffer from complex PTSD or trauma because of things that we've exposed ourselves to, because we might have been impulsive or made poor choices, or maybe it's just our environment. And so oftentimes PTSD and ADHD go together, and we kind of find ourselves friends with people or working with people, or we just find a way to be around the people that are similar to us. And I think that that's one thing I love about the community, is that we're such a really great, wonderful, supportive community, no matter what type you are. I mean, I'm dyslexic, I have PTSD, and I have ADHD. I often joke that it's like the alphabet army. I've every letter of the alphabet. And but you know what? Someone told me this that I think is so important for you to hear, is that they said, when you share your story, you give other people permission to share theirs. And I think that is exactly what you're doing. And I really appreciate
that's the point. That's the point. And then, and amazingly, same as you were saying, that I'm still a very happy-go-lucky guy. Every morning I have the passion. I usually get up around 5:30 in the morning, and I always feel I'm late. And then I always make my bed, and then I always enjoy, even now with all the ups and downs, your parents are involved in the forest industry. It's a roller coaster a lot of times, not always fun, but I always enjoy it. And to me, the glass is always half full, not half empty. And I've always done that, and I still do that today at 82 and a half, So that's kind of the way I look at it. And I still want to write one book a year, and as long as I can. And wherever the opportunity presents itself to speak about ADHD in particular, because I don't want to see wherever I can have some effect in sending the message, it's a superpower. You have a blessing of having it, not the other way around. And that to me is important.
Yeah, it is. It's really inspiring. And the more stories we hear about people being resilient and, going above the odds and, all of that kind of stuff, it is inspiring. And it reminds us that, we are capable of anything we put our mind to.
It's no question.
No one is slowing us down.
No.
It's, we're there. And I love that about my brain, is that it's never the end of anything. It's always a new beginning. There's always a new possibility. And it is hard sometimes and it's frustrating, but it's only when I have to try to explain it to somebody else who doesn't understand it. I think acceptance is a huge piece that people have on their journey. Is, like I've said, when you get diagnosed, all these little puzzle pieces start fitting together and you're seeing it in your family and you're seeing in your past and it all makes sense. But then for a little bit, it's kind of like, wait a second, why did no one else see it? Why did no one else help me? Why didn't teachers give me more support? Why did that make sense? I got bullied so much about this or this and that. And there is this kind of like low moment where you kind of are ashamed and you feel bad. And there's this and it's kind of like, the stages of grief. And so I think it's really important to work on that acceptance piece and teach people, hey, you can't get rid of it if you tried. You've had it, whether you knew it or not. And now this next question is, what do we do next? Where do we go? What do we start? What are your strengths? Where can you go? It's never the end, right? There's always just a new beginning. And I think that I'll always be thankful for that, because I do struggle with imposter syndrome sometimes, where I'm like, did I get too big for my britches? Is this all going to fail? Am I capable of this? But I heard the other day that people who are successful are the only people who have imposter syndrome.
Exactly, and then the other thing about educational systems, micro-certification, focusing on the focus area, or the allows a whole lot of other people to become successful, and it would be helpful to totally restructuring what education really means. And and not only to people with ADHD, but in the broader community as well. Yeah.
Well, right. And a lot of us are hands-on learners, and we really do well when we're working with our hands. And that's where we need people the most right now, are in those trades. We need more people involved in that. And I think that unfortunately with the times or this generation, I'm not sure why that's something people are pulling away from, because when you think about trades and how well needed it is, it's people who are doing things with their hands. You get great benefits. They make sure the pay is well. And so I don't know, maybe those micro sessions that you're talking about with the education.
Micro certification, yeah.
Yeah, micro certifications is definitely something that would have piqued my interest and gotten me going, or at least sparked.
Absolutely.
Sparked something where it might not be the thing I end on, but it's the thing that gets me started. And then you kind of find out, this worked, this didn't work. Oh, I want to do this now, and just follow whatever that is.
And then the other part that is important to me, that's then my next book, is finding your passion, living the dream, and saying that find that you like to do. So many people don't like what they're doing. You say, I hate my job. Well, why don't you change? Well, I can't, and I got a mortgage and blah, 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 and all. I said, no, you must take a different direction, because it affects everything around you, your family, yourself, and the rest of your life. Doing something that you don't like is the wrong thing. And then
it's torture.
And then asking the reasonable question is saying, okay, John, that's what you're writing about it. Are you living the dream, John? I am, big time.
I would say that you definitely are.
Yeah. Katie, I love our conversation and our podcast. So let's make sure we stay in touch, sending the message. Send us other places that we can speak or where we should be communicating to, because obviously our objectives are the same. The more people know about ADHD and the benefits thereof, and then, and for those that they care about and they love around them, the better it is for them, to make this a superpower rather than being looked at as a liability.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we're an interest-based learning system. So we're going to go after what we're interested in. And so I think that's something where, if you're mentioning earlier about with work, is that if you're doing something you're not passionate in, or you're doing something you're not interested in, you're not going to find joy in your day.
No.
And you're not going to find it lifelong. It's just going to hurt you. Like I said, we can't sit on our hands and wait for something to happen. We make things happen. And I think that is something we definitely have in common, as we are the makers of the things that happen.
Exactly. Katie, it was my pleasure to have this podcast with you.
It was a pleasure to be on here. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me, and allowing me to share my story as well. I really appreciate it. And we'll hook up again. I'll see you on the circuit or something, or at a conference, or.
And I'm going to send you this book.
Yes, please.
Scott will send it to you, and we'll send you the new one that's coming out in July as well. Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream, and it's on all the major media. And then watch my On the Brink by John A. Brink, our podcast. They are a wide number of podcasts on different issues, but they're all very interesting. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, same to you. Take care. Bye.